Apparently, the god of predictions, the Karnak of elections, has come out to tell us that he knows who's going to win. It's American University professor Dr. Alan Lichtman, who has correctly predicted 9 of the last 10 presidential elections. He gave his final verdict today about the 2024 race. The only one he's gotten wrong out of the last 10 elections was Bush v. Gore. He must have been confused by all the sighing, Carl. It also could have been the very tight hanging Chad race that we saw there. But he's right almost always. And he says Vice President Kamala Harris will defeat former President Donald Trump and keep the White House in Democratic hands. Well, what do you guys think of the good professor?
Well, listen, we'll see. We'll see whether, his track record isn't as sterling, I think, as most people make it out to be. But look, this is a close race. It could go either way. I mean, that's the truth. And, he's got his 13 keys that he uses, and that's fine. But, we go by what the polls show. And right now, the polls show this is a very, very close race.
Politico put it at, what did they say? Knife fight in a phone booth. That's how tight it is right now. And we've had a couple of polls come out over the past few days. ABC and Ipsos released a poll on Tuesday showing no post-DNC bounce for her, showing that they polled registered voters before and after the convention, and she was up +4 in both of them. It does show that when you zero it down to likely voters, she's up 6, but that's, a national poll. And then you get into this Politico state of the race as of Monday, and this is the one I wanted to ask you guys about, because they go through all of the swing states, and they take your average, the RCP average, the 538 average, that's Nate Silver's old organization, which he's got some issues with now in the way they're trying to implement his old model. And then there's the actual Nate Silver, which he calls the Silver Bulletin average. And they compared all 3 of them in all of the 7 swing states. And what they showed is that it is extremely tight. But I will tell you, there's a lot of Harris leads. They're slim, but this is my armchair take on what I'm looking at here. Like in Arizona, again, this is going at the 3 of your averages compared to each other. Here's Arizona. She's plus 0.2, plus 0.5, plus 0.5. Georgia, she's plus 0.4. Then Trump plus 0.2, Harris plus 0.1. Michigan, she's plus 2.4, plus 1.1, plus 1.9. And that's kind of how it goes throughout, except North Carolina, which shows Trump plus 0.4, 0.6, 0.3. I know from listening to you guys that you think Pennsylvania in particular is tighter than this comparison is showing, which shows her plus 1.2, plus 0.5, plus 1.2. Anyway, as somebody who has said she's going to vote for Trump, I don't like these numbers. It's tight, but she seems to be leading in all of them. And I know that these polls have margins of error, but you guys are always pointing out that's why you do averages of all the polls. So what am I missing here, Andrew? Is there something that's wrong with looking at it this way?
No, I think that's a good way to look at it. And I think you're right to point out that the national averages are not that important. What really matters is these swing states. Pennsylvania is the tightest of the tight. I've never seen anything like this before. Tom may know better, but the last 3 polls that went into the RCP average were all tied. So we have Pennsylvania totally tied up. That rarely happens with that kind of consistency. So I think it will come down to Pennsylvania. That's 19 electoral votes. So that's pretty important state for Trump to win. But as we know, this is about as tight a race as it could be right now. I would, I think we'll just have to wait and see.
That's the thing. We don't know. It's frustrating. We want to know. We want the predictor that's going to show us how, and it's just not there. This is going to be a nail biter, isn't it, Carl?
Yeah, and I don't want to know. I look forward to election night. Megyn, here's the thing. Tom and I have been talking about this going back and forth on our own podcast. In 2016 and again in 2020, 6 of these 7 states broke the same way for Donald Trump and then for Joe Biden. There's nothing written in stone or in the heavens that they have to break that way. It could be 4-3. We could be piecing together and trying, more like 2,000, the one that Professor Lichter missed. We're looking for 2 or 3 electoral votes here or there. But the other big question that I have going into this is, have these pollsters fixed the problems that caused them to undercount Donald Trump in both of those elections? They think they have. They say they've tried, but we won't know till election night, because remember, if this thing is tied in all these swing states, it wasn't close 4 years ago. Biden had a significant lead in all these states, and then they were much closer. So if the pollsters are wrong again, 2, 3, 4 points off, then Trump's going to win. So that's the other thing we'll know election night, because these are Real Clear Politics and Nate Silver and 538. They're not doing their original polling. They are aggregating these polls, and then Politico's aggregating the aggregators. But the big question people know, and I was talking to Doug Rivers, who does the YouGov poll. I had dinner with him Sunday night, and he says that he hopes they fixed it, but he won't know.
The other thing that we're not talking about much at all, Tom, is the get out the vote operation. And Trump has been dumping on vote by mail for 4 years now.
Yeah.
You can tell when somebody smart gets in his ear and says, stop saying that. We need to bank early vote. He'll have like one interview where he's like, yeah, okay, vote by mail. And then left to his own devices, he's back to, no, could be fraud. But they're going to start banking vote, especially on the Dem side, starting on September 16th in Pennsylvania, right? 16th or 13th? Anyway, it was soon. And on the Republican side, I don't really know what the get out the vote operation is, other than Charlie Kirk, our pal Charlie, over at Turning Point USA. The RNC seems to have outsourced it to him, and he's great, but is he enough?
Yeah, I had a discussion with Sean Trendy, who's our senior elections analyst, and he's one of the smartest guys, in the country on politics. And we were talking about this, and he was saying, he doesn't buy that. It's, the hardcore voters are going to vote, whether they vote early, whether they vote on election day, it's still a vote for the candidate. It's really finding those marginal voters and chasing down those marginal voters that is going to end up making the difference in these states. But just to go back to the polling for a second, Megyn, because I think it is important. I mean, we just did a video. It's called a Real Clear Quick Take, and you can go find it on on social media, where we analyzed the 2016 and the 2020 by state in these 7 battleground states, how badly the pollsters undercounted Trump's vote in 2016 and 2020. And it was obviously worse in Wisconsin. They missed by 7 points in 2016 and then 6 points in 2020. So on average, about 6.5 points over the last 2 cycles. Kamala Harris is up 1.4 in Wisconsin right now. So if they do, in fact, get it wrong by the same amount they have averaged over the last 2 cycles, Trump would be ahead in Wisconsin. And you go down these states like Arizona and Georgia, for example, in 2016, 2020, those were the 2 most accurate states. Pollsters hit them within 0.5 percentage point. And right now, Trump's got a 1% lead in Arizona, and Kamala Harris has a 0.1% lead in Georgia. So, you just go and look at these, you look at how close these states are, and then you look at, past performance of these pollsters. And then you also look at the national average, right? Hillary Clinton won by 2.1% and lost that election in the battleground states. Joe Biden won by 4.5%, the national popular vote, and just barely won. So, Kamala Harris right now is at 2 points in our national average, 2.5 points in the 5-way race. So she's on the lower end of that range, where if the polls were actually accurate, she would probably come up short in these battleground states. If she can move that national lead to 3, 4, 5 points, then you're looking at a situation where she should be comfortably enough ahead in enough battleground states to win this election. But right now, it is absolutely a jump ball, in my opinion, when you look at these numbers.
It's almost like when you go to the doctor and they take your temperature and you're like, what are you doing? I have a stomach ache. Why are you taking my temperature? It's like, well, if your temperature's high, it tells me something's wrong with you on the inside. If your temperature's normal, it tells me something else about what's happening to you. And the national vote is like the temperature. Like, it doesn't tell us what the actual thing is, but it gives us a clue as to how things are going. And she needs to get those numbers up in the national vote for us to believe she's going to carry the swing states. That's what she's been saying. It's going to be tight. We need to win. We need to win by a lot. And they will have a strong get out the vote operation. Here's Steve Kornacki the other day talking about how Democrats feeling good about seeing those numbers I just ticked off with you guys, showing Harris up more than Trump in some of these states. Need to take a breath and take a beat.
If you take a look at the paths, the easiest path for each candidate will start with Kamala Harris. All of the state polling is very tight, but the best polling, relatively speaking, for Harris and the Democrats has been in, we talk about them all the time, these Great Lakes states, Big Ten states, whatever you want to call them, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Now, if Harris could win those three states, just for the sake of argument, turn them blue there, exactly 270 electoral votes for her. Now, if she slips up, Pennsylvania in particular is one Republicans of these three think they have a good shot at here. Let's say she were to slip up, Harris did, and lost Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is the biggest of all the swing states, 19 electoral votes. Harris would have to compensate by winning at least 2 from the Sun Belt here. And for Trump's easiest path quickly here, it's to get Pennsylvania, it's to hold North Carolina like he did in 20, and it's to win back Georgia, which he very narrowly lost. That would get him to exactly the magic number.
Wow. It's when you see that, you start thinking, Andrew, why did she go with her emotional support governor? Why didn't she pick Josh Shapiro?
I think that will be a real question that will be asked the day after the election. And we'll know then whether it was a good choice or a bad choice. But there certainly is a lot of people, or are a lot of people, who think that Josh Shapiro might have been the wiser choice, because I personally feel that Pennsylvania is the most important state. Everyone else is saying it as well. But one thing I'm looking at is McCormick, the Senate race there, because McCormick is doing surprisingly well. And that is another indicator. If McCormick does well, there may be some reverse coattails in Pennsylvania.
That would be amazing, right? You guys have been talking about, no one's really talking about Pennsylvania, McCormick as a possible GOP pickup. That hasn't really been at the front of the tongue. No,
but Tom, you keep a better eye on the polls than I do, but he's done well in the last 2 polls that I saw, at least.
Well,
right?
the CNN polls that just came out had that race tied, and he has been, pounding Bob Casey with these ads, basically of Kamala Harris, her own words, talking about wanting to ban fracking and the like. So he's run a very smart campaign thus far, and it seems to be paying off. And he is doing better than a lot of the other Republican Senate candidates around the country.
Did you know there's nearly $1 trillion of infrastructure and pandemic funds yet to be spent? That's right. There's a massive amount of money that the lame duck administration is pushing hard to spend in their last few months. If the president is able to push these funds out, we could see another prolonged inflation surge, just like during COVID. But there's hope. A gold IRA from Birch Gold Group can be an inflation hedge for your savings in uncertain times. To see how to protect your IRA or 401k, get your free info kit on gold by texting MK to 989898. Birch Gold makes it seamless to roll over your retirement account while preserving your tax-advantaged status. Don't wait for the president's spending spree to potentially tank the dollar further. Protect your financial future now. Text MK to get more info, and text my initials to the number 989898. That will bring you your free info kit from Birch Gold. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.